Welcome, and it's that time of the week again. It's the AutoJet Business Show. I'm your host, David Zidel, and we're going to talk business. Tonight we've got Craig Sher, and tonight's going to be a little bit of a different slant on things. Normally we have business owners, and now we've got somebody who's going to talk about how people think with their investments. Craig Sher is the Chief Product and Investment Officer at Discovery Invest. Welcome, Craig.
Good to be here.
And as always, I'm going to start off with a short little business story. And tonight's story is about Starbucks and the psychology of progress. So Starbucks once tested two versions of their loyalty card. They created a loyalty card as we know it that will have 10 purchases, and after 10 you get the free coffee, and that's how everybody does it today. And they tried another one, and the other one had 12 purchases, but the first two had already been stamped. So it is exactly the same, or so we think, as the first one. You just need the 10 coffees, but the fact that two had already been stamped made a huge difference. Even though both required the same effort, customers with the second card completed the journey more often. And the question is why? And the answer is because people are motivated by a feeling of progress that's already made. It was almost like they're already on the journey, and so they've got to continue with it. And behavioral scientists call this the endowed progress effect. So it has all these fancy names, behavioral economics, which is really just the psychology of business. And the reason I'm bringing this in is part of what we're going to be talking about is behavioral economics. Customers don't just respond to rewards, they respond to the feeling of momentum. If a momentum has already been created, if people can see that something's already started, there's a bigger chance that they're going to finish it. We don't, as humans, like leaving most things halfway through. It's almost like an accomplishment to get it done. And it's interesting, I was listening to Adrian talk about his new book that is coming out, and he spoke about setting goals. Well, what was fascinating is obviously goals motivate you to do things, but he's taken it for slightly different. And he says that part of behavioral economics is we hate losing things more than gaining. And if you set a goal and you're dedicated to a goal, that brings in the fact that if you don't achieve it, you're then losing something. And it's the same kind of thing, that if you're already on the way to achieving it, you might make it easier to achieve. And that was the short business story for tonight. We're going to get to Craig, and let me give a quick introduction to Craig. As I said, he's the Chief Product and Investment Officer at Discovery Invest. Craig has played a key role in shaping how South Africans think about investing and retirement. Craig began his career at the Discovery Group in 2003 as an actuary. And over the years, his strategic leadership has helped build and grow Discovery Invest into a business known for innovation and long-term thinking. He's widely recognized for his ability to blend behavioral economics with shared value principles, designing investment solutions that encourage earlier saving, smarter decisions, and more sustainable retirement outcomes. Academically, Craig holds an honors degree in actuarial science and advanced mathematics of finance, both from Wits. And how did I get to Craig? I've been following Craig on LinkedIn, where he's written over 80 posts and articles exploring investing and behavioral science, and that's the science behind the financial decisions. And I called him up and invited him on the show, and he asked a simple question. He said to me, "Why do you want me on the show?" And my answer was that his writing consistently touches on what I've looked through and found is 6 themes that I think could be very valuable to our listeners. So the 6 themes we're going to be covering are retirement planning and innovation, behavioral economics and investor psychology, health span and the intersection of health and wealth, investment strategy and globalization, leadership, culture, and personal reflections, And then, last but not least, is parenting and intergenerational wealth. So Craig will help us explore these ideas and discuss how individuals can prepare better for a changing retirement landscape. Craig, we're going to go through the first one. What exactly is retirement planning? And what is so new about it that we now use the term innovation in relation to that?
Well, retirement planning, I just guess by definition, is the fact that you're going to put some money aside now so that you can get it later on when you're older, right? That's the kind of idea behind it. And it's obviously been around for a long time. People have to save for retirement, and they've understood that. Just touching on behavioral economics, we know that putting money aside for later is something that evokes. It makes people upset. They don't really want to do it. Really, that's the concept called the concept of hyperbolic discounting. That you're going to get something in the future, but you don't really value that thing in the future. What you'd rather spend the money now. That's like kind of the problem with retirement.
So are you saying people see, if I spend it now, I'm getting the benefit now. If I save for retirement, it's so far in the future, it doesn't look like it's worth it.
It's exactly that. So you could spend your money now on sort of paying off a shiny new car that you get to use tomorrow, or you could put it into an RA that's going to be for the future you when you're old and maybe sicker and probably not having as much fun as you could have now. And so you definitely feel like spending the money now. And that's the big challenge with retirement saving. And I think there's been a lot of thought around how to make people save. It's generally around like tax incentives. We'll tax you less if you save some money now. And although that is an incentive, it's not a particularly strong incentive, I don't think. People will do it, and if you get a financial advisor, they'll help you out in doing that. But the reality is we have a very big savings crisis in South Africa. I think the statistic is 6% of people can afford retirement, which basically means that almost everybody can't. And even those that can generally do it in difficulty.
So is it a case that I'm kind of not saving because I don't understand it? Or is it that it just seems so far in the future and no one else is doing it and I might as well just live my life? And how do you get people to spend? Because it's hard to save for the future when I'm kind of trying to make ends meet today.
Exactly, and that talks to something called it's called the sandwich generation. We'll touch on it a little bit later, but sandwich generation really means that today I have to help pay for my children, and I have to help pay for my parents because they didn't save for retirement. So I'm like kind of stuck in the middle, having to pay for 3 generations: myself, my children, and my parents. And I'm getting squeezed in every way because of that. The problem with that is now when I get older, my kids are now stuck in that sandwich generation. They now have to look after me, and they have to look after their kids. And so it's a recursive problem. You have this thing, and it comes over and over, and it's a very difficult thing to get out of. What you really need to get people off is they have to see the value in saving. They have to see how important it actually is. And there's a whole lot of behavioral finance and behavioral economic things that you can do to get people to see the value in it and to evoke strong senses of loss aversion and those type of things. And you can really make a difference to that. You can make people save more than they would have otherwise, and that can make a big difference to their retirement outcomes.
So is it a case of you try and persuade people to do the right thing, even if it's for the wrong reasons? So I might save money because I want to save tax, but the outcome is really for the future. So I'm doing the right thing, but maybe for the wrong reasons.
Well, we try to get people to do the right things for the right reasons. We have found, let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we've done. We found that if you can give people a big reward now, a reward today, then they'll tend to value the reward today, and they'll put some money aside for the future if you give them that reward today. That's kind of the idea behind it. So what we developed is we have a retirement product, but the way the retirement product works is you put your money in, and then Discovery will put its money into your retirement fund as well. So you get a boost to your fund value. If you keep your money invested all the way through, then you get to keep the boosted money that we put in, everything that we put in. And it's a big amount. We put in like 20% of what you put in. So a massive amount of money. If you stay the course and you keep topping up, you get to keep all that money. The trick is if you don't, if you decide to pull your money out and buy that shiny car, or you want to take it away in some way, use it on something else, we take our money back. And so what we do is we evoke a very strong sense of loss aversion. And that's that very key principle. You don't want to lose something now. Discovery gave you this extra money, but I don't want Discovery to take that money back. And so what I'll rather do is I'll rather try and find somewhere else to afford that thing that I want, or I'll delay getting that shiny new car, but at least my retirement fund won't be touched. And then, like, doing these type of things are ways of making people change their behavior by giving them these like benevolent rewards actually for doing it.
So you're giving people reward for sticking for the long term, and then the government is doing the exact opposite with this two-pot system where they're saying to you, you've got retirement, but you know what? You can take a third now where before you weren't allowed to do it. And maybe it's a controversial area, but before I get to your comment on that, I'll give you some time to think about it because we'll talk about it after the ad break. Welcome back. I'm David Zidel. You're listening to the Orchard Business Show, and we're busy talking to Craig Sher, who's the Chief Product and Investment Officer at Discovery Invest. And Craig was just sharing with us just before the break about the concept of loss aversion. And loss aversion is people don't like to lose things, but it's not equal to gaining something. In my experience, I kind of feel like losing is almost like 3 times the event or the aspect of gaining. And so they've introduced into their investment a way that if you don't stick for the long run, you now face this loss aversion. And it's encouraging you, as I said, to do the right thing, maybe for the wrong reasons. And just before the break, I asked Craig, but the government has taken people's investment where they couldn't touch it. And now they've said they've got a two-pot, I think it's called the two-pot system, where you can now take 1/3 immediately. And so you're losing that long-term benefit. And maybe it's a little bit controversial and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but
No.
Do you agree with me that the government is almost working against what's good for the person in the long run?
No, I wouldn't say that. On the face of it, there can be downsides to the two-pot implementation that they did. Just to say that I think where it originally came from was pressure from unions. And the reality is that the average South African, he works at he works at a job, and they're putting money aside for him in a provident fund of some sort. And the rules behind a provident fund were that if he resigns, he's actually able to get this provident fund money. And so there was a big problem in that people were resigning from their jobs in order to get hold of their provident funds that they had built up, and this has become a big issue. So what the two-pot solution is intended to do is it's intended to say that you can get 1/3 of your money from now onwards, but the rest of it is tied up. The rest of it you can't actually access. And the thinking is that you'll give people some, they can get some of their retirement funding now. They'll get taxed on it, and they may not get as much as they thought that they would. But the rest of it then is tied up for retirement, and now they can't get hold of it. They also won't resign from their jobs in order to get it. So two-pot has like some downsides, but it definitely has some upsides.
I'm glad you explained that, because I only saw the one side of it, and I didn't see the fact that people were still getting it, but they had to resign, so they were losing almost twice. So if we look at the other stuff, and what I want to talk about is, and it's not really in the order that I mentioned the points, but the parenting and intergenerational wealth. Is it a case of teaching your kids what to do, or is it a case of you starting to implement stuff so that they're not stuck in, as you called it, the sandwich? What did you call it?
The sandwich generation.
The sandwich generation.
I think it's both. I think there's no substitute for teaching your children about money and what saving really means and how to invest it. And I think we tend to leave that too late, or not do it at all. In fact, in many cases, and although it is complicated, it's not more complicated than for a child to learn to swim or ride a bike. These are things that we teach our children, then they know how to do it, and then they can do it forever. And teaching about how to save, or where that you should put some money aside, that you should build up some money as you get older, is incredibly important and should be done. The other thing that I think parents can do that they probably discount in a big way is if you save a small amount of money for your children when they are born. And it's very difficult because when kids are born, they're very expensive. In fact, kids are always expensive. That's and you don't need to be an actuary to work that one out. They're expensive little things, and you got to pay for school, and you got to pay for all these type of things. The reality is, if you put aside some money for your children when they are born, that is worth 7 to 10 times the value of them having to put that money aside when they grow up. So every rand that you put aside now is worth 10 rands of the child trying to do it themselves when they get older. And that's just because of the impact of compound interest, right? You're putting some money aside for now. That's going to compound for 20 or 25 years before that child actually gets his first salary, and he's going to start putting money aside. And by then, it's a meaningful amount of money. So it's not like you have to put away hundreds of thousands or millions of rands. You put aside a little bit. You grow it in an appropriate investment, and it can be really, really meaningful. And that's a very practical way of getting out of this sandwich generation. Now, or at least helping in a big way.
So we all know, and I was looking at the stock market in America earlier today, and the market's crashing, and everyone says, but then it gets compounded. But the markets go up and down, and most people don't know how to invest or where to put the money. So what advice would you give somebody if they want to follow your advice and try and get out of this intergenerational sandwich, or they want to put more meat in the middle of the sandwich? How do they go about doing that?
I think that one of the most important things is to get someone who knows about it. So get a financial advisor. If you we tend to discount the advice that financial advisors give. We tend to think that we can do it ourselves. In many cases, we can't, and there's a lot of value in that. And getting someone to at least help you on that journey is a very important thing.
How do we know if we're getting the right person or a good person? Because a lot of people say, the advisor's just looking after themselves and they want to earn a commission. How do you know that you're getting good advice? Because again, the results of the advice only show up in 20, 30 years' time.
I think it's the same as any professional that you would go to. You would say the same of a lawyer. How do I know that my lawyer's in it for me or himself, etc.? Or a doctor, I guess, or anyone. You would work on a reputation. You've got to get to the right person. Do your research. I don't think that is as much of a problem as people think it is. There's obviously there are bad apples, but if you do your research right, then it's you can get someone who's really good.
So it's interesting when you talk about their bad apples. I think I can't remember the term, but in behavioral economics, there's a term, maybe it's the recency aspect, or things, when you hear something bad, it looks much bigger than the rest. So, you look at an apple and there's one little speck on the apple and you say, oh, the apple's rotten, but it's not. There's one little speck, the rest of it is fine. And maybe that's where people look at advisors, and as anywhere, there might be bad advice out there from one or two, but most of it is good.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's also a lot of value in just, if you may be able to do it yourself and get it cheaper, but in many cases you probably won't go and do it. You've got this, we go back to what we said earlier. There's the shiny car or the shiny thing that you want to buy versus actually saving. You need the financial advisor to come in, put your pen to paper, and make sure that you actually save it. Come visit you the next year and say, look, you're on track or you're not on track. You need to go do this. Otherwise, people don't tend to do that.
So having a debit order makes it a lot easier to pay than every single month deciding I'm going to move that money. Because once the debit order just becomes the natural thing to do.
Yeah, you've got to be very disciplined if you're going to do it any other way, or at least putting your bonuses aside if you get one, or a 13th check, or a portion of your salary. You've got to be very, very disciplined to do it, or get someone to help you do it.
So somebody is about to finish university, they're about to get their first job. Do you have a set of rules or guidelines that you would say to them, look, these are the things that you need to concentrate on?
I would say to someone who's starting out, we tend to think that there's a rule that if I spend less than I earn, then that's okay, right? I'm getting in enough, and then I'm spending less than that. But that's not nearly enough. You know, we're completely ignoring the fact that you have to put money aside for the future. If you start when you're younger and you're very disciplined and you come out of school or university and you get a job and you're going to start off, the amount that you'll need to actually put aside is relatively minor. It can be 6 or 7% of your salary that you would need to put aside for a reasonable type of retirement outcome. You leave it to your 30s, it moves to 10 or 15%. You leave it to your 50s, it's like 50%. So the earlier you start, the more manageable it becomes.
Is there any way I can go back to my 20s?
You can not do that.
So on the other side of it, somebody who is in their 50s and all of a sudden thinks, hang on a second, I can now see the finish line from a work point of view, where years ago I couldn't, and I haven't followed Craig's advice. Is there a time when you say, no, too late, sorry for you, good luck in your next life? Or is there something that one can do even at a later stage in life?
There's always something you can do. Just to maybe give some background. If you go back to the 1800s, people worked until the day they died, because that's like life expectancies were much shorter, right? You would work until the end of your life. That would be it. Today, you're probably going, if you retire at say 65 or 70 around there, you're probably going to spend as much time in retirement as you did in your working career. That's like kind of the quantum of the numbers now. You're going to spend a lot of time in retirement. I think one of the things that you can definitely do, and a lot of governments around the world are actually doing it, is they're pushing out the retirement age. The idea is really that people don't come to like sort of a certain age and then they're done with their productivity to the world. That's not how it works. You find that some of the greatest knowledge, the greatest things that people can do actually come when they're older, and they have this kind of they've lived through a lot of things, and they can give a lot more to the world, and therefore they tend to keep working. Actually, they work, they save, and they can have a very productive life in their 80s, 90s, and onwards. It talks to always, I guess, educating yourself and always, being on top of what the world is like, so that you can always contribute. As long as you've got something to give, then you can, guess philosophically, you can be paid for it.
And if you look at a quantum of money, like people kind of feel like it's never enough. And from a saving point of view. So I've got a double barrel question. One, how do you know if you've got enough, first of all? And second of all, if you have got a pot of money, how do you know how much you should be drawing from that each year, so that if you live into your 90s and hundreds, that it's still there and you're not depleting it completely?
So the question on enough is a very difficult one, because I don't, if you'd ask anyone how much is enough money, they'd probably give you a number, and then if they ever reach that number, they'd probably say, no, I need to get more. That's the nature of money. There are models that can work this out. So based on life expectancies and how long people are going to live, you can actually model out how much people will get. And there's things called replacement ratios, which is what percentage of your income you'll need to survive in retirement. And you can look at all of those things and work out exactly what economically enough actually means. The one caution around it is that we tend to think of, I even mentioned it, the life expectancy, that there's like a date when people will die, right? That's like your life expectancy. The reality of life expectancy is that it's an average. It's an average of a population. It's a life expectancy. So you may, depending on where you live and your access to healthcare, etc., you may find a life expectancy of 85 as a number that people may use, or they may use 87, or they may use 8, depending. It doesn't matter. The truth is, because that's an average, it's an average of people who lived shorter, and it's an average of people who live much longer, right? And the truth is, if you are planning on a financial plan that ends at life expectancy, you are about 60% of people, 50 to 60% of people will outlive that number. And if you think about it in that way, you can't be planning to have a financial plan that is 60% chance of being wrong. You can't have that, right? You need to plan for something that's going to last into your 90s, etc. So it comes back to what the question of enough is and how much to draw down. And then just to take all of that into account with, again, with your financial advisor to work through the numbers.
So there's no set percentage. Like I've heard things of you should draw down 4, maybe 5%, not more than that, and then it will kind of regenerate itself. So have I got the wrong numbers in mind?
No, it's right. People tend to make rules of thumb, which can be right. You'll also know that if you think about it, if you're drawing down, you need to draw down less if you're drawing down when you're younger because the money has to last longer. If you're much older, you can afford to draw down more. It also depends on your investment returns that you're going to get out of it, and that's fine. It's a lot more it's a lot more complicated than like sort of a rule of thumb. What we also found is people in retirement, when they're drawing out money and their need for income, it tends to actually follow what's called a smile pattern. In the first few years of retirement, your need for income actually is higher, right? Because you've just, I guess, retired or you're kind of slowing down, but now you're going to travel and you're very active and there's lots of things that you can still do. Your need for income is actually much higher. As you move into the middle of retirement, your need for income actually comes down. You become a little bit more sedentary. You tend to not travel as much. You probably aren't funding your children as much because now they all have jobs and now you're in that like middle part. And then as you get older again, your need for income starts increasing because of medical expenses. And so it follows this like sort of smile pattern. Wow. So the idea of, you kind of put your money in and it needs to grow by inflation every year is fine. It's a bit simplistic. It can work, but what you actually see in reality is people have very different needs over time, and all of that has to be taken into account.
Yeah, because you're looking at your expenses today, and that varies, as you just said. I was just thinking while you're saying that smile pattern, I was thinking, I wonder what the frown pattern looks like, if that's a better way to go or not. So I remember not so long ago, my wife came to me and she came out and said, "Geez, David, can you believe that cappuccinos are now 20 Rand?" And it most probably was a while back, but it doesn't feel like it was so long ago. And now you'll go and a cappuccino's mid-40s, sometimes even 50. And it's kind of like, so you can think that you've saved enough, but the purchasing power now of that money has also diminished. So you almost have to keep up with the diminishing power of the money itself. Is that something that's unique to South Africa, or is that just the way money works in a worldwide concept?
I wouldn't mess with anybody's cappuccino in the morning. Because you be very careful when you start playing with that. It's really just the issue around inflation, the fact that money devalues over time, or the cost of living increases over time. Inflation in itself, people tend to think of it as a bad thing. They tend to say, "I remember when I was younger and this cappuccino cost only 5 Rand or 2 Rand, and now it's 30 Rand or 50 Rand, etc." That in itself is that's normal. In fact, prices should actually go up every single year. There's a lot of reasons for that, which we don't have to go into, but inflation in itself is not bad. The problem is when the cost of living goes up more than I guess how much people are earning. That's the main problem. And so the key actually is that when you're saving for the future, that your investments are also keeping up with the cost, your cost of living and what that's going to be in the future. And one of the things we tend to find when people are investing is they tend to, again, it's this issue of loss aversion, but this time it works against you, that people tend to be very scared of losing money. And so they tend to become more conservative in their investments, when in fact they should actually be more aggressive, because if you're aggressive over the long term, you'll get more out of it. And that becomes a very, very important thing.
Great. So I'm going to ask you questions around that, but what you're saying is be conservative short term, but aggressive long term.
And retirement saving is long term.
And
So
that's
be
long.
aggressive.
Yeah.
Be more aggressive.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more around this when we come back. Welcome back. You're listening to the Orchard Business Show. I'm David Zidel, and together we're talking to Craig Sher, and he's the Chief Product and Investment Officer at Discovery Invest. And Craig was saying about some people, we're stuck in the sandwich generation where we're paying for our parents who are not earning anymore. We're paying for ourselves and then still paying for the kids. And how do we move across so that this sandwich factory doesn't carry on operating as it is forever? And an interesting concept he mentioned just before the break was the smile pattern, that our expenses don't remain the same. And in fact, even when you retire, in your first years after retirement, you actually spend a lot more because you're now going on holiday and you're spending it. And then it comes down because you've kind of done that and you into your retirement years of just relaxing. And then it starts going up again because now you got all the health issues and things like that. So that was an interesting concept I haven't heard of before. It looks like a smile, but maybe it's not such a happy concept. So, Craig, I want to ask you, just in terms of an investment strategy, how does one go about really understanding what your strategy should be? And if you can touch also on kind of, does this include globalizing, or if you're living in South Africa, you should just look at investing in South Africa?
The world's a big place, and investing shouldn't be just constrained to South Africa, although we live here, and it's important. Your investment strategy is actually something that needs to take account of all the themes and all the investments that are happening around the world. And at different times, different markets will be doing different things. Sometimes, like over the last 5 years, South Africa has done incredibly well. Our stock market, in fact, beating the US, in fact, which a lot of people don't know. But in many cases, you actually want to be in some of the biggest markets. As an example, in South Africa, we don't really have our stock market doesn't really invest in things as big as technology and AI and that type of thing, which is massive in the US and probably will be driving most of the investment growth over the next couple of years. So getting access to that is absolutely crucial. The other thing which people don't realize is that it's often not where you're investing, but it's often when you're investing. And you tend to think of being in the market at the right time is the most important thing. We tend to think of timing the market, and we've all heard the old adage of, what is it? It's not time.
It's not time in the market. It's not timing the market. It's time in the market.
Exactly. It's not timing the market. It's time in the market. But what a lot of people don't realize in that is that it's not just being in the market all the time. It's very important that you don't miss what I call these outlier days. They are days that happen when investments will shoot up. They just happen. They happen over like a 1 day period, and that'll be it. And we did a study it was a few years ago in 2023. We looked back over the last 10 years, from 2013 to 2023, and we looked at the returns of the S&P, the US market. And we said, what happens if you were to miss just the 5 best days, right? So you did everything right for 3,645 days, but you missed the 5 best days. What would your pot be? What would your retirement or what would your investment be at the end? And we found that it would be 30% lower. You would have wiped out about 30% of your entire retirement pot by not being there during those 5 days, or more in some cases. And the most interesting thing out of that, if that's not interesting enough, is when those 5 days actually happened. The problem is they don't happen when you expect them to happen. They happen exactly when you don't expect them to happen. And if you think about over that period from 2013 to 2023, when did those 5 best days happen? They happened during COVID. They actually happened at the time.
All 5 days were
all 5 days were
Wow.
during COVID, the best 5 days.
Wow.
Which means that when the markets were crashing and people saw them crashing, people started disinvesting and pulling their money out of the market because they were getting scared. That's when those 5 days happened. And if you came down when the market fell, and then you decided to pull your money out, and you missed that rebound, and you missed, let's say, 5 rebounds, you were unlucky enough to do that, you would have wiped out a huge chunk of your savings. And so the crucial aspect here is not only where you invest, but when you're putting your money in, and you don't know when those 5 days are going to be, or however many they are. The other thing that happens, if you look at the S&P over the last couple of years, I think it's 20 shares in the S&P. So 5% of the S&P, 4% of the S&P drove, I think it's 20% of the returns, or 60%, sorry, 60% of the returns in the S&P. And it's absolutely, and we think of those as, what are those? The Magnificent Seven, those 7 stocks that are really driving all the returns that you're seeing, not only in the US, in fact, across the whole world. And so it's not, you have to get all these things right at exactly the same time.
So it's not only being there on those days, but it's also being in the right shares throughout. Did you ever look at it the other way around? Of if you took out the 5 worst days, like if you weren't in the market for those 5 worst days, how much would have you saved?
We didn't look at it. You probably have done very well if you could have timed that.
But obviously one can't.
You don't know when those are going to happen.
You don't know when that's,
exactly.
Yeah. And then it might come down to the averages. If you average the bad and the maybe.
The problem is our behavior works against us. When we see the market fall, we pull out. We actually have this, you have like in your gut, you see the market crashing and you've got to get out. You feel like I'm losing money. That's exactly when you mustn't.
So it's almost like I look at Elon Musk and I say, we talk about people have loss aversion and they're scared of losing more than winning. I don't think he has a chromosome or that, whatever that is. He doesn't see fear the same way as we do. And maybe we should learn from that from an investment point of view, because it's exactly what you say. When everything's dropping, that's when we pull out, and maybe that's getting ready to do that bounce.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage, because our natural inclination is not to do that. So even though you can say now when everything's going well that that's what you're going to do, when the market is crashing and you see everything falling and everybody, then you have to see if you're actually going to do it or not. That's when it's difficult.
And while you're talking, I'm thinking of a saying that says the trend is your friend. And so people are saying that it's going up, so it'll continue like that. But unfortunately, I've experienced in some of my investing time is the trend is your friend until the bend at the end. And that bend is when you, as you say, you feel like you're on a roller coaster and you want to get off. It's like, it's enough. And you normally get off at the worst possible time.
Spot on. That's not timing the market. That's exactly.
And I think you've got about 80 different articles I looked at on LinkedIn over the last 5 years, and each one was looking at investment and looking at, as we've been talking, behavioral economics and leadership and your kids and all that. So we're about to go for a break, but when we come back, I want to find out from you, of all those articles that you've written, what are the key lessons you think you're trying to get across with those articles? Welcome back. You're listening to the Orchard Business Show. I'm David Zidel, and together we're talking or listening to Craig Sher, the Chief Product and Investment Officer at Discovery Invest. A couple of things that was mentioned was the when, not really the where. So timing is an important thing, but you've written about, or you've put on your LinkedIn, you've put a whole lot of stuff on there that was articles and different bits of information, and you're obviously putting it up because if you put in 80 different articles, you're trying to get a message across. If you look at it and look back, what do you think the key important things, or what lesson are you trying to get across to people who are reading your posts and now listening to you on the radio?
Well, a lot of it is the type of things that we've been talking about. Some of it is investment related. So we'll talk about things like being in the market when it's right. not being too conservative with your investments, getting the right type of financial advice, the value of saving for children, all those type of the value of globalizing your investments, etc. That the importance of health span and living longer and what that really means for an investment outcome. And I think we've touched on a lot of that. Some of the things are actually more related to things around the I guess some of my thoughts, my general thoughts on behavioral economics and how they apply in the workspace or in leadership or even in the family space. And it tends to relate to whatever's going on at the time. I had a post, I remember a little while back, where it was about 2 years ago. It was coming up to Valentine's Day again. And instead of getting flowers, I got my wife an RA.
Very romantic.
I am particularly a romantic guy. And I did that, and I joked about it on LinkedIn. The reality is done incredibly well. It's done much better than any bouquet would have done. I don't know if she appreciates it as much as I thought it was a smart idea, but anyway, that's kind of how it's done. And I had a lot of responses as a result of that. Another one that we did quite recently is we tried something with my son. Now, I'm not a fan, my wife, we're not a fan of screen time for kids. There's a lot of research showing that children's time in front of a phone and a TV, it's got a lot of bad effects on kids, and screen time needs to be controlled in a very big way. But obviously, you can't take your kids off these things when all their friends are on it, and how do you manage that? So what we did is we devised an incentive system at home that echoes the same kind of thinking that Vitality has. And what we did is we said that if he runs on the treadmill, we have a treadmill at home, if he runs on the treadmill and he does his kilometers on the treadmill, he will bank screen time hours as a concept. So now what's happening is he's been running on this treadmill and he's been earning these hours for screen time. And he's been making these streaks of things, and we introduced this a little while back. At the time that I had done the LinkedIn post, he had, in different sessions, he had run the equivalent of the Comrades Marathon. As of, I think, yesterday or the day before, he's done now 250 kilometers, which is like running from here to Pretoria 4 times, something like that twice. And so he's building up this thing. He's building up. He's banking these hours and hours of screen time. The most interesting thing out of it is actually he's not spending them. He's actually banking it, and he's like doesn't want to use them actually, because this has become like a currency for him. So he's running. He's 11 years old. So he's running on the treadmill. He's banking these screen time hours. He's not using them. He's as much as he could, and he's incredibly proud of the fact that he's earning this currency. And so it's a very behavioral economics at work and finance, except we're also doing it in parenting and kind of seeing what happens.
I think that's an astounding story. And it's interesting. It reminds me of a saying that when you look at things differently, you see different things. And first of all, you got to then tell the kid who had this free currency or free time with the screens that that's no longer free. But I think your message greater than that is it's almost like the screen time is to get rid of the boredom. And if you can introduce something to replace that, then you're teaching somebody to think completely differently.
That's a fascinating knock-on effect. His friends all started doing it as well.
That's amazing.
So it was quite a weird thing that he told them. He says, I'm doing this thing, and I ran these like 3 kilometers on a treadmill and whatever it happened. And then his friends all started running up and down their roads because they wanted to also do this. I don't know if their parents were giving them screen time or not, but everyone started running up and down.
So here's an idea for you. Create an app that parents can use, and it automatically will shut the phone down and give them screen time, etc.
Good idea.
We're about to come to the end of the chat, and I want to thank you for all this amazing input that you've put in. And one of the things is you need to, in your investment, you need to be aggressive, but aggressive in the right place. And I was thinking about the story of how romantic you are and buying your wife an RA rather than flowers. And then I was thinking, if somebody does that, for somebody who just buys an RA instead of flowers, then that is a lot more valuable when somebody's busy pushing up puppies. Then they've still got the rewards of that. But Craig, I just want to thank you so much for talking about things that we haven't spoken about before, talking about loss aversion, talking about the sandwich generation, the smile patterns, to look at things differently, and maybe even in your own way, incentivize your own kids in doing the right thing, even if your son maybe, and that's a great example of doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. He's running not because he wants to keep fit, but he needs the screen time, and then gets to the point where he's not even using it. So, Craig, I look forward to reading some more of your LinkedIn posts. Keep thinking the way you do, because it's adding value to the world. I'm David Zidel. This has been Craig Sher, and this has been the Orchard Business Show.